I did work 60 hours a week easily. In a hotel from 5:30 till 11. Then I went to school from 12 till 3. Then I would go home, study more for about an hour and a half. Then I would go to restaurants and work from 7 till midnight. And then I would go home and sleep probably about 5 hours.
Dagmara Rudkin left Poland as a teenager and was prepared to work all the hours she could to pay for her education. This is Writer's Mosaic, What We Leave We Carry, the series that tells the true life stories of migration to the UK.
I have really happy memories of my childhood in Poland. I grew up in Wrocław. It's a big, both industrial and cultural city. I would probably compare it to maybe Birmingham, perhaps, or Glasgow. Quite energetic and open, I suppose, to newcomers. So interestingly, Wrocław was historically German and Polish on and off, actually. But until 1945, it was a German city. At the end of the war, we know that Polish borders were shifted. So the Germans were forced to leave Wrocław, or Breslau, as it was called in German, and was then taken away by settlers, Poles who came from the east. So my dad was born in what was then Poland, but now is part of Ukraine. And my mom came from central Poland. They met up in the uni days. And Wrocław had work opportunities and jobs. And I think the sense of being in quite a young in heart city, because it wasn't Polish for years, of centuries, as say Krakow was. There's something of openness about the spirit, the Wrocław spirit. And that's seen in cultural events, in actually contemporary arts now. So it's a great city to be brought up in. My mum and dad came from farming stock, so my holidays, winter and summer holidays in particular, were spent in the little villages where my parents came from. And I really loved that. Just hanging around with my cousins. There was sometimes up to 17 of us just going feral. It's something which I really, really wish my children and current generation of kids could experience. Just so lovely. Forests, mushroom picking, swimming in the lakes and rivers, making rafts. It's a little bit like a Huckleberry Finn kind of childhood. So consequently, having spent a year clubbing and kind of going to sort of rite of passage that young people would do anywhere in the world, perhaps not respecting Catholic youth. By then I was definitely lapsed. So having spent this sort of drunken year partying, I just felt really bored and really wanted to do something else, which was productive, constructive, adventurous. You kind of don't know what to do with your life. So that's the decision of coming to Great Britain happen. And I did it with my two Polish mates. We all came together. My mum was a Solidarność activist, so we had leaflets, there were conversations, there were meetings. I was involved in it. I was born in 1970, so I was kind of in my early teens. I thought of it probably more as something quite, interesting, but not with the sense of the gravity, the potential loss of our liberties, integrity, freedom. I saw tanks on streets. There was a big Russian station next to us with Russian shops and the Russians who were behind the fence, and we had nothing to do with them. We were not allowed to talk to them. My dad was very interestingly not getting involved in either side. And I think that's to do with the sense of trauma that he went through, with the trauma that he experienced. Both my parents went to labor camps. Mum to German labor camps, and they were sent to France. So we're definitely very much anti-Russians, anti-Nazis. Dad went as a little boy with all his family to Russian labor camps. So that was quite a different experience. And the hunger that he, and the abuse that he suffered from had such horrendous influence on him that when Solidarity and all the things were happening, I don't think he had energy to contemplate or be involved. And all he was thinking of is not, how to save us from going hungry. Actually, when the state of war was, the martial law was declared, we were traveling in a Trabant from my grandmother's farm with a slaughtered pig in the back of the car. The slaughtered pig every now and then was given to all the Polish relatives. We had no idea. So I remember the radio in the car announcing, this horrendous event, and you think, oh, thank God we have a slaughtered pig at the back of the car. We're going to be okay. I mean, that's really, really primal instincts of we're going to be okay for the next few weeks at least. So I came in 1991. Poland was becoming kind of open to the West, but we still had to have visas. A few months before, I had opportunity to go to Denmark. It was one of the very first countries in the West when you could go without having formal visa. Somehow Denmark was never seen as a part of this Wild West the way Germany or Great Britain or USA was. Even though the level of social care and wealth in Denmark is phenomenal. So we went to Denmark on a ferry with my best mate who had auntie there. And then I got a job doing washing up in a Greek restaurant run by a couple of Egyptian brothers. So I worked there for about a couple of months in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and saved something like $800, which was a phenomenal amount of money in 1990. Would have been probably, I don't know, like 8 months or 10 months earning in Poland. So came back with all the dollars to Poland, spent probably half of it partying with my mates. And then when we had $400 left, we thought, shit, we better do something with our life. So we came to the UK. We had student visas, spent I think a couple of £100 paying for a month of full-time studies, learning English as a foreign language. I didn't speak any English at all at German and Russian school. So the first few weeks, I guess, we were communicating using lyrics of songs. Yes, I knew English from, listening to Rolling Stones and The Doors. We came on a bus. Flights were way too expensive. We came on a coach. It was about 28-hour journey. But, 19s. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, no problem. Because I went to Denmark a little bit earlier, I've already had the sense of this otherness, colour. More than anything was the colour and range, the eclectic crowds, different races, different shapes, different hair colours, different clothing. If you imagine looking at the painting, which is covered with dust and this really old fat, and you kind of imagine removing all of these layers, and you have this sort of colours glittering and these figures appearing in the painting. That's a little bit like what it was like coming to the West, seeing this mosaic of these varieties, this range of looks and voices and languages. Amazing. I had a backpack with just a backpack with, clothes for partying and and we imagined we would probably do washing up or cleaning, so just basic stuff. It wasn't much. Do you know, we were so lucky, so amazingly lucky. So I came with two mates. We went to youth hostel first, where we immediately lost half of our money. Someone actually took half of our money. One of my mates spoke really good English, so that was great. And the cleaner in this youth hostel told us about the Weeping Wall. The Weeping Wall is the corner shop out next to Polish Centre, Posk, near Hammersmith, where all adverts of illegal jobs and flats were posted. So we went with our backpack. By then we had very little money, and we saw this advert in Polish, a flat, a room to rent for 3 beds. How did we ring? We had no mobile. There were no mobile phones. We must have rang it from like a little corner phone. The Polish family, mother and a daughter. So we had accommodation sorted for 3 weeks already by doing that. And secondly, we met this guy next to Weeping Wall who really fancied one of my mates, and he got us this job serving breakfast in a hotel in Hammersmith, I think, Erskort, serving breakfast, and because it was like a buffet, we didn't have to speak English, only tea and coffee. I mean, it was all done through complete, coincidences, lucky breaks. Lots of lucky breaks. So we stayed in this room for 3 weeks, for a month. In fact, they brought a fourth girl. So we kind of did a bit of like a dancing chair situation. She did night shifts in a hotel. So she slept in one of our beds when we worked, and we kind of swapped beds, depending on what shifts we did. Everything what we hoped and better, because we started learning English at phenomenal speed. Probably about in 2 or 3 months we could effortlessly, we could survive. You could make conversations, we could find better jobs. We started meeting people. They were mainly foreigners. I actually didn't properly meet English people, didn't make friends, probably until I met my husband. Or maybe I had a couple of English boyfriends then first, maybe 6 months into me being in the UK. Prior to that, there were other foreigners, Spaniards, Brazilians, Czechs. From washing up and serving coffees and teas, I then got a better job in Garfunkel restaurants, this chain. Pretty awful, kind of generic food being served to tourists in London. So I would deliver food first, and then I kind of went up the ladder to taking orders, which meant that I had better tips. And that sort of went for a year and a bit, maybe. And actually with tips, I was making enough money to continue paying for full-time education and my accommodation, so I could survive. I was completely independent. And I was learning English, but I did work 60 hours a week, easily. In a hotel from 5:30 till 11 in the morning. Then I went to school from 12 till 3 for 3 hours. Then I would go home, study more for about an hour and a half. Then I would go to restaurants and work from 7 till midnight. And then I would go home and sleep probably about 5 hours. Actually meeting my husband-to-be, Charles, in a most profound level, it gave me a sense of knowing that UK will be the place I will probably settle. That was never my intention in the first place. I wanted to learn English and then continue travelling. and wanted to go to France and Spain to pick just basic kind of use of Spanish and French so I could work as an air hostess or stewardess on a ferry. I really wanted to travel. And then when I met Charles, I knew that plans would change. Just, I kind of went, it's almost like you step in a river and you don't know what's going to take you. It was going to take me around the world, but it kind of took me around UK as it turned out. Yeah, because I moved in with him quite quickly. And we got married really quickly too. I was only 22 when we got married. And I'm quite an independent, it was then very feisty young woman who really didn't think seriously of marriage, certainly not in my 20s. But we did for very practical reasons. So I could get a permanent residency. I could work legally. And also, there was a huge pressure from my parents, the idea of living in sin, God's looking over us, this God's wrath. It's just a constant nag. I thought, for God's sake, so we got married. Because his mother is Dutch, and they emigrated to Australia. When we met, all his family lived in Australia. So he had the sense of otherness and not quite belonging, and feeling quite eclectic with his views. And he's he's a very wild spirit and totally doesn't have this reserved personality that English people are often accused of. Perhaps unjustly, actually, I think. I've never, ever, perhaps except for tiny few incidents, I've never experienced any hostility, racism, any kind of never felt unwelcomed. I have a really overwhelmingly positive feeling of feeling welcomed in the UK. Yeah, really lucky. How liberal people's views are. That was such an opening to me. Gay rights, for starters. Poland was incredibly prejudiced at the time, in terms of anyone that didn't fit into kind of Catholic, white, not homogenic, but also heterosexual, really, really walking on a very straight path, life choices. Anything that kind of didn't fit into this pattern really wasn't welcome. So coming to the UK, when you saw how liberal people are, how tolerant people are, especially in London where I started my life, was incredibly uplifting, eye-opening experience for me. I identified myself as a Pole living somewhere else. Polish, British. That's what I would say in my CV or in my artist statement. I'm a Polish British artist. That's a short answer, but the long answer is I see myself as a citizen of the world. I don't really believe in borders. I don't really care so much for the kind of national qualities of, I think one of the reasons I left Poland is because the sense of patriotism, which I understand, but also born with nationalism. I don't think you should take a great pride or feel ashamed of who you are, if I was born in Bulgaria or Turkey or Norway or Zimbabwe, that's nothing to take credit for. That's where you happen to be born. When I started working in Garfunkel, I saw on the menu a whole section which said vegetarian. I had absolutely no idea what it meant, and I thought just lots of vegetables with the food. So I remember someone asking me if vegetarian burger had any meat in it. And I said, well, of course it does, but it has also a lot of vegetables. And and I hated eating meat anyway. Polish cuisine is so full of pork, and it's so fatty, and I hated it. I despised meat since I was born. But there was no concept of being vegetarian when I was in Poland. So coming to UK and then learning you can be vegetarian without necessarily being Hare Krishna which is, another thing which I was told. You have to be Hare Krishna, and if you eat meat, you won't have babies, you're going to have leukemia, blah, 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 blah. So, so the first thing when I learned that you can be vegetarian is just stop eating meat. Wonderful. But obviously I love pierogi and naleśniki, so the pancakes, the dumplings, I love them still and make them for my family, for my children. The Polish Wigilia, Christmas Eve, is full of dumplings with sauerkraut and beetroot with little raviolis with wild mushrooms. So sure, food and music. There's two things which I definitely miss and bring on daily basis to my household. The thing which I miss is the theatre and live theatre and Polish folk music. There's a genre called poezja śpiewana, which is sung poetry. If you think of people like maybe Leonard Cohen or Jacques Brel, is bringing just really beautiful lyrics and adding usually very melancholy music to it. And I miss not experiencing it on a regular basis. I've always spoken to my children in Polish since they were born, and I still do. My older son is 24 and he speaks not a native but pretty good Polish. And my youngest son, who's 20, manages Polish pretty well. I would say the comprehension is 100% and they're confident speakers. My husband is British Dutch with Australian backgrounds, and his background is languages as well. So he was always really open to us speaking Polish at home, which was great. I think when you have mixed marriages, that can be quite difficult. It can be seen as being quite antisocial, perhaps. So thankfully that wasn't the case. My linguistic identity is definitely Polish, even though I feel comfortable speaking, communicating, reading, teaching in English. I'm also really aware of my shortcomings. Reading poetry, for example, when you have English and Polish version, there's completely different sense of immersion when you read poetry in your native language. And however sympathetic translations will be, I think there are nuances in poetry more than anything that are very hard to capture in another language. When I go to Poland, it's this sense of euphoria. Oh, how fantastic! These familiar smells. Hot summers, sitting in a city square and drinking beer and see these really smartly dressed people. Poles, like Italians, take enormous pride in dressing up when they go on a little stroll. Meeting my mates and having wonderful food that my mum makes. So seeing all my family, that's wonderful. And after about 3 or 5 days, I started noticing all the things which really annoyed me in the first place. The rudeness on the street, people getting really offended in shops if you ask them to show you, lift something from the shelf, or not minding the business and telling you what to do. The way you hold your bag or hold your baby or the length of your skirt. So, and then I go back to Britain and I can see myself being now essentially British because of the sense of acceptance of otherness that perhaps still isn't quite there in Poland, but always changing. It's very hard to pinpoint exact moment when you sense that something's really shifted in you and your sense of identity changed. It's organic. It takes years. Yeah, I've been here for 30 years now. That's way more than half of my life. And this sense of identity is so interesting, and I can't quite work it out. What shapes it, how it's formed. I feel I belong to both worlds and neither of this world. I wish I had a greater sense of the world. I wish I had a year of traveling before we settled. I really wish I went backpacking to India, and Asia. It doesn't color my view of the world. My life is not filled with regrets at all. If I was to choose the life path, I would still do that, marrying the love of my life and spending life with him, rather than having this kind of travel. I mean, we will still travel, absolutely. It's just when you're 53, you're not going to be quite as accepting of crowds and youth hostels and backpacking. Perhaps we will, perhaps we will. Never too late. I see myself as being profoundly lucky, really, really lucky. But it came this sense of optimism. I think for all my vices and talents and everything that makes us into a human being, I think it's my sense of optimism, which I inherited from my mother, and the fact that we are here temporarily and we have to really be grateful for what we have. And I try to, and this is sort of reinforced by being here in the UK. It's giving me this sense that everything's possible. Something which I hadn't mentioned, which was real eye-opening, is that you don't have to go, there's more than one path to get to where you want to get. You don't have to jump through certain hoops. For example, going to study a particular subject matter at university. I saw a lot of successful and really respected by society people who are not professors, and even though it is a class-ridden society, I also think there are opportunities which perhaps I wouldn't have had in Poland, having not gone to uni, or having not passed the university exams. So for that I'm really grateful that I managed to go to uni in my late 20s and then did MA in my 40s, and no one questioned it, and there was no sense, it's too late, you shouldn't bother, don't bother.
Dagmara Rudkin was talking to Maria Jastrzębska.